And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Welcome back to the TMCJ podcast. We are on episode 98. And it has been a while since episode 97. So long, in fact, that Blue forgot we weren't streaming and just started talking while he tried to count us in.
Well, no, the talking bit was normal. It's the not hitting the start button that was the issue. And last time we did a podcast, we were in America. Actually, did we do a podcast?
I think we did a podcast after you guys... Yeah, I got back. That was episode 97.
Oh, did we do another one after? Yes, because you said 97 in America.
Yeah, I got the number wrong in the US. I was off by 1, but we're on 98 now. That I checked. We're right on that one.
Also, I should put your face over there so I'm talking towards the microphone. Anyway.
Yeah, so a bit has... I mean, a lot of time has passed, so this might be a little slapshot all over the place as we talk through basically whatever topics are coming up. First of all, I wanted to say something, and I swear, because I know we talked about this in episode 97 as well. I'm not going to get into a long rant about it, but Twitter, all that crazy stuff has still been going on.
Right. Anything interesting?
A few things. Elon Musk basically mass unbanned everyone that was banned. Like, he did like a general amnesty. Instituted some new rules that basically Twitter's old rules are the new rules. As long as you're not doing anything illegal, it's okay, which is the way it should be. So much so that I still had a personal Twitter account, and I went back and found the login for it and went in. And you know what? It's actually kind of entertaining again, because it's just the things that actually start trending are not horrible, depressing things. They're actually goofy, funny memes.
Actually, I'm looking at the trending things right now, and there is nothing particularly interesting whatsoever. Hang on. I clicked on a trending thing called ketchup, and the first thing I saw was Donald Trump's face.
So one of the things I had a bunch of stuff that I used to follow on there, and one of them was called dark stock images. So, you know, like these companies that produce a lot of stock photography, so that like businesses will buy a stock photo, and it'll be like a generic image of a businessman pointing at a clipboard or something like that, or a guy wearing a hard hat. Yeah, stock photos. Dark stock photos, that's the one. And so they basically are just like, there's one where it's Santa on the roof, but he's shitting down the chimney. There's one where it's like a shot of a guy and a girl in the front seat of their car holding up a beer. The next shot is them taking a sip, and the third shot is her pushing the guy in a wheelchair. Like,
I'm looking at some of these things now, and
it's pretty dark, and some of them are kind of a little gross, but they're funny. They are. It's very much my kind of humor. Anyway, so I don't want to go on too far about it, but it seems to have been changed for the better, and it's always fun watching people whine, which is what all the people who didn't want it to be fun are doing. I also saw a funny video which combined my interest of, I don't know, well, my hatred of activists with my hatred of the French.
Right.
It was in France, and some activists pulled that stupid thing where you sit in the road and just block traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Except, unlike when it happened here, like the police didn't do much to stop the protest. Well, they should have just dragged them out of the road. But what happened in France was this clip of this big, fat French dude who just gets out of his car and literally just bodily picks up this activist and tosses him onto the sidewalk, picks up another one and does the same thing, and he's letting the other cars through, and he's shouting at them in French. And, I don't know.
That was actually, I was working today, and I think one of my colleagues in particular shares a lot of views with you. Which is worrying, I know. And we were talking about that time when I was on the train, and I messaged a group of people that I know, that there were these people being absolute jerks on the train, drinking and being inappropriate and swearing loudly and stuff, while there were other people who didn't have seats who were quite elderly. And so I put in the group chat, this is these people being a-holes, that kind of thing. And I got in trouble for that, apparently.
Why?
Because you should apparently just let the old people stay standing and let the young people keep drinking alcohol and swearing on public transport. I don't fucking know.
The drinking on public transport, I don't see a problem with that.
I don't have a problem with that as long
or
as
them
people
being
are
rowdy,
being
but
sensible.
But no, but that's what I was about to say. Is that like the drinking and being rowdy? Okay, they're young, whatever. But at least you gotta have some respect. Respect your elders. I think that's something you should do, unless your elders being an asshole.
But yeah, so my work colleague is they've got quite old-fashioned views where if you you hold a door open for someone and that kind of thing, which you don't do these days because it could offend someone.
Oh, I still do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean I do it anyway because it's just a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
Not because of anyone's.
I have to it's reflexive for me. I've had it when I've had to think about it. Like, oh, is this person getting offended? It's just become this awkward thing where I stand in front of the door with it kind of like half open, half closed, and it's almost like I'm pulling the door shut so I'm not holding it open for them. So I just say fuck it. No, just be courteous.
So when I was at an event recently, I'm waiting for my partner, and there were people. I was standing quite close to, next to a set of double doors.
Yeah.
And anyway, these couple of old people start waddling over to the door. So I open it, wait for them to go through, close it, and then the moment that the door clicks closed again, and I'm still waiting in the same spot, person with crutches comes around the corner. And I'm like, oh god. I realised that I've just signed myself up to be the doorman until my partner gets back. So I ended up opening and closing this bloody door about 3 or 4 times for people coming through.
It's funny you mentioned people getting offended about this. It reminds me of I had a friend that was one of those types to get offended about stuff like that. And this was back probably in my early 20s. We had gone to somewhere anyway, and I did that. I held the door for her as it was a concert that she got free tickets to, and so I held the door for her going in there, and she was getting a bit offended by it. It's like, oh, you don't have to hold the door for me because I'm a woman. I'm like, I'm holding the door for you because it's polite. If you don't like it, go back outside. I'll close it.
Yeah.
It's just common courtesy. Anyway.
Yeah, there is it is a thing now that everyone these days is apparently a snowflake. I mean, there's I feel like we're in the worst of both worlds because I think a snowflake, in the nicest possible way, would hold the door open for someone because they don't want to offend anyone so you're helping other people by doing it. Yeah. But at the same time, the same people who are being called snowflakes are being called snowflakes because they don't hold the door open. What I'm trying to say is, it's like people who say, oh, you're a white knight, as if that's a bad thing.
I think we live in a very cynical age, and so any form of real sincerity is looked at and kind of scoffed at. So the whole white knight thing, that's a sign of that, because traditionally that would be the right thing to do. If you see somebody in trouble, particularly if a guy saw a woman in trouble, you should help her out. And I think that's something that's wired into us as human beings. But that's a very sincere action to take, and I'm sarcastic as hell because we live in that kind of a cynical, sarcastic time.
Yeah, and at the moment, I'm sure you're aware, but the English type of football World Cup is happening at the moment in Qatar. And before it started, there was this massive hoo-ha about the fact that, it's taking place in Qatar, where you can't be gay, you have far less rights as a woman, all these other kinds of things. But then the moment it started, people seem to have just forgotten that and were just, enjoying the football. It's like...
Well, it's because there were a few very loud people that needed to go ooh, look at me, I have the right beliefs. And then once they'd gotten that out there, then they just decided.
No, I think
then
it's.
they just
I think
watched
it's
football.
absolutely right. They like, fuck. I mean, clearly you're on the opposite side of this, but
I'm not though. So
fuck going to Qatar. Fuck it, allowing it to happen in Qatar. Like that's fucked up.
this is going. No, I'm not on the other side of this, but I take it a step further. The problem with let me lay out this thought as best I can.
Okay.
Yes, their culture over there, to our sensibilities, is oppressive and regressive. It's something that, like, at least in most of the West, it's like, yeah, just treat everyone equally, fairly, equal rights under the law. Over there, it's still very culturally influenced by the religion in that region. And so you don't have that same sort of sensibility. I personally think that the way that we go about things, at least that treat everyone fairly and equally, regardless of race, sex, gender, whatever, that's a superior worldview. But going back to what you said earlier, the people who are like, oh, they're worried if they do hold the door, don't hold the door, like they're too weak-willed to make a commitment one way or the other. Whereas I think it takes a certain amount of integrity to say, no, the way we think and do things is better. The way they do things is wrong, and fuck you, I'm not watching that soccer game. But again, they're too weak-willed, so they just go out and they go like, ooh, we think this is bad, and then they don't do anything more than that.
But because like when the whole war in Ukraine kicked off, and then what's that thing called? The European singing thing. Eurovision. I don't know what. Hang on, let me just double check.
There's so many of those
before I say something wrong.
There are so many of those. Get a normal person up there to sing like a song, and then you get ratings, and I can't keep track of them all.
Hang on.
Wait.
Yeah. Okay. So Russia was not allowed in the Eurovision Song Contest because they started a war with Ukraine. Like.
Yeah,
so that's the line.
Do you think exactly? Do you think Putin gives a fuck?
I don't. Well, it's. I don't think that many Russians are on board with what's happening. It's Russia. It's
like what it is in almost every situation like this, where you've got a regime. You've got probably 10 or 15% of the population that's hoorah, let's go with this. You got 10 or 15% of the population who's like, fuck this is horrible, we got to get out of this, protest. And then you've got another 70% of the population that just doesn't give a fuck, or they're somewhere on that spectrum.
Yeah.
That's how, and they're just trying to get on with their lives. That's my read on the situation.
I'm just kind of... political correctness has gone mad. This is essentially what the segment has become. From the smallest things to the biggest things.
It's been a while since we raged on political correctness.
This is what happens when Twitter gets brought up.
It's true.
And I mean, I don't think we even need to talk about it, because we've talked so many times about Twitch and YouTube's morals and things like that. Yeah. But I feel like they are incomparable to these bigger, wider world situations, like these massive events that go on every year. But no one talks about them because everyone wants to have the football happen. There
was something I was big history buff. There's you see cycles in history when you're talking about generations of people. So, and I can't remember the exact quote, and I can't remember who said this quote, and so I'm going to paraphrase it and probably butcher it, but it was, hard times breed strong men, breed good times, breed bad men who bring on hard times.
Yeah.
So it goes in that cycle where, World War II,
people
for
get
instance,
too comfortable and then people do something shitty.
Yeah, World War II was really rough, and it created some really tough, people who... Yeah. Those people brought on the economic booms and, the huge societal changes that came about in the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And then the 50s and 60s were such good times and there weren't really as many there were struggles, but they weren't comparable to the ones that came before. And so you ended up with a lot more, I would say, people who maybe by no fault of their own were a bit weaker because they weren't challenged by those big important things happening in the world. And then you get to the 90s and it was even easier and there was even less struggle going on. And that's where you get people like what's happening now who, when these big things that are happening, like the war that you're talking about, that's going on, and no one has the force of will to actually do anything effective about it and take a strong stance. They'll whine about it online, and they'll go like, "Oh, you can't come to our song contest," but they're not actually going to do anything about it.
Yeah, and I think people do. I mean, it's going to sound bad. In a wartime situation, people have a very easy and real target to take their emotion and anger out on. Whereas these days, obviously, there's no real enemies in day-to-day life. So I can understand people getting shouty and pissy and whatever. I mean, hell, when everyone was stuck inside with COVID, everyone got quite pent-up energy. And so you saw some people doing stupid things. Like that was probably the closest thing we've seen, at least in my lifetime, to a global event like a world war was COVID.
Yeah.
Because everyone had to change their ways of living.
Yeah.
And some people disagreed with it, other people didn't. It's like,
yeah, and I don't want to. I could get into my opinion on it, but I'm pretty sure that might get us in trouble on YouTube. So I'm just not going to say anything.
But yeah, granted, it's nothing like a war. It's
not, and yeah,
it's not got the horrors of war, but it has got like the death, not the same scale, but the eminent presence that someone around you could die.
And what I was saying about that kind of cycle that you'd see, right, of like hardship and stuff. When you talk about World War II, I mean, before that, things weren't exactly easy because you had the Great Depression and World War I before that. And even before that, people were still in large parts of the world on subsistence living. Like they were farmers, or they had to be practical. You didn't have mass manufacturing. Now things are significantly easier for the average person all over the world, whether people want to accept it or not. The quality of life everywhere on the globe is better than it's ever been. And it's easier than it's ever been. And so I feel like when we get to the next stage in that cycle, the hard times are probably going to be harder than they've ever been.
Not for the poor bastards that have got Taliban ruling over them at the moment, but I agree for most places.
But so even if you compare them to like their own history, a lot of them still have cell phones. A lot of them still have like running water and electricity and modern amenities. So, and comparing apples to apples, it's still an increase in quality of life. It's not if you compare, say, the way that they're having it now versus. I mean, there are exceptions to it too. Like you've got.
Well, I feel like it's kind of like living in Nazi Germany. You had all those amenities, but you were constantly living in fear of someone saying you were something that you weren't, or something saying that you were.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, you could point to places like Iran, too. Iran was actually, back in the 70s, was a fairly modern country. And then when they got taken over by the... what the hell? Ayatollah, I think is his title. The religious leader that rules the country now. You know, it's the same thing. They still have a lot of modern amenities, but they're living under that same sort of oppressive regime where if they step outside that line, they're in a lot of trouble. So, like, there are exceptions, but I'm talking in broad averages. If you compare people in various regions of the world as they are now compared to as they were decades ago or at the turn of the century, it's significant improvements.
I feel like we've been escalating this argument because we went from people being an asshole on a train to Nazis.
I mean, isn't that how it always goes on the internet?
It's always that you can't beat Nazis.
I mean, we started off talking about Twitter, like you said. That was inevitably where it was going to end up.
Yeah. Have you got any topics, guys?
I've been reading some books.
Hey, actually, I have a topic that I think you'll really enjoy.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have been watching Cyberpunk's anime TV series.
Oh, Edgerunners. Fucking love that show.
And I told you about this already, actually, I think, but I don't think we've actually spoken about it at any length.
Yeah.
No. So we are a very short ways into it. Well, actually, we're fairly far into it, but you say that it's not at all... We haven't got to any of the starting good points yet, or something like that.
So, the first 2 or 3 episodes are kind of like introducing the characters, introducing the world. They hook you in hard early on, but then it takes a step back and introduces the characters in the world for a couple episodes. But it's around the halfway point in the series where I think it just, I don't know, just... So where are you now? What episode? Do you know?
Well, so you gave this series pretty rave reviews, right?
I did, and I still would.
The first few episodes, I found quite... I couldn't put myself into the story. That is to say, I didn't think that the reactions that people had were very realistic. There was definitely when you first see the power of one of those combat suits and how it just obliterates anything with ease, and then it's just like, why have the military or the police not got better shit? Because at the moment you're losing like 20 guys to kill one civilian.
Yeah. So this is the sort of thing that is explained by understanding like the lore of the cyberpunk universe.
Right.
Like it's a dystopia, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's a dystopia where like life is just cheap. Like people are, there's millions and millions and millions of people, and they get just thrown into the meat grinder together because it's essentially a world that's ruled by these mega corporations that people back in the 80s kind of assumed. They saw these big corporations growing and growing. They saw huge population booms like never before in history. And so a lot of the fiction of the time, which is when cyberpunk was originally envisioned, was about things growing out of control, human life becoming meaningless because there's just so many humans, and then corporations essentially not giving a shit and just impersonally. So the police, they're not really that important of an entity in that series. Like, the corporations have their own militaries, and they are very well equipped. They have very good equipment. But the police, they're just publicly funded, so they get jack all for their equipment.
The comparison that I made in my head when watching it was, this is like a mega city from Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
But there are no judges.
That's actually a really good comparison, because Judge Dredd is another dystopian like future that was imagined around the same time as cyberpunk. So that's actually a really good comparison to make.
But obviously in the first few episodes, one of the main draws into the series, they're obviously using a lot of lust-filled scenes, shall we say.
Yeah, and they do that, again, this is very true to the world. Like, this is a world where basically everything has gone pure hedonism. It's like, drugs, junk food, sex, whatever, it's all to be had on the cheap everywhere.
Yeah, and it's all very visible. But they went hard on that for the first few episodes, and then you basically didn't see it after that.
Yeah.
And I got a very jarring feel of the classic anime trope of they went in super hard on episode 1, maybe episode 2, to draw people in with a shocking scene, and then they just went flat.
It does, like I said, that's kind of what I meant earlier when I said the first episode, they get you with a hook, and even into the second episode. And then as you get into the episodes immediately after that, they take a step back and they focus on character development. And actually like introducing and really fleshing out some of the other characters.
Well, the main female that you're meant to be like, oh, she's really cool and hot and really like emo, which people love these days. She was alright up till the fact when she straight up betrayed him, and I was like, I just didn't give a fuck about her anymore. Because she has no morals. And I know you could say that, it's a dystopian world, so...
No. I wasn't going to say that. And I was going to say that's exactly the reaction you're supposed to have. The reaction you had right there, I'm convinced that's what they wanted to happen in the story, because they put her up in your mind, then they knocked her down, and then in terms of how much you care about her, then the story's going to work with that. And
no, but because then they're like, oh, but the main character has a love interest in her, and they build that up and up and up, and then they have sex, and then she really cares about him when he's in trouble, and I just don't give a fuck, because she's already a piece of scum to me.
Okay. I guess, yeah, it doesn't affect everyone. I quite like that storyline between them.
There's hardly any actual scenes with the two of them.
Are you still in the first half of the series?
I think I'm halfway through the series.
Okay, then they play a little bit more of a central role in the latter half of this. So there's,
I feel more of a connection to the main leader of the gang. Go on.
I would say there are three like major climactic moments in the series. One that happens in the very beginning, one that happens in the middle, and one that happens right at the end. And all of them I felt were played very effectively. And the series does follow a bit of a curve where it starts off really on like an intense note, then tapers off a little bit, and then boom, gets intense again, and then tapers off a little bit, and then boom, gets intense again. And I think that was a very effective way to structure the story. So.
But yes,
I'll be curious to see. This is a good snapshot into your mindset midway through the series. I'm curious what you'll think near the end.
Yeah, I'm hoping for just something a bit more unique from it. And I don't think it's definitely not a bland anime. There are so many. They're not all. Actually, I would say that. Never mind. I was going to say they're not in school, but they are in school, which is just every anime ever.
We had to, anime. They had to be in a. What was he? He was in an academy.
It's probably the most common anime trope out there. Everyone either starts off or is permanently in for the entire anime some kind of school.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you see that with a lot of Japanese media in general. Like, it's very youth focused. Like, it's people who are young or relatively young going out on adventures and having ambitions. It's rare that you get stories about like older or middle-aged people.
But I love those. There's one about Japanese spies from World War II and their training, and then they go off and they're in different countries pretending to be people they're not, so they could feed information back. And each episode's about a different spy in a different country, and that was fantastic. Well, and it wasn't all children; it was full-grown people.
I didn't say children. I said,
but you know what I mean.
I do, and I agree with you. There are, but what am I trying to say? Cowboy Bebop. They're all adults in that series. That's also a great anime. There's really good it's a very chill, very just like. I can't. There's not. I'm trying to think of a word for it. Anime is called Mushishi.
Right.
It's about this traveling herbalist, this older guy who just wanders around and interacts with nature and goes on adventures, wandering through the kind of mildly enchanted hills and mountains of a fantasy Japan. There are really good animes out there that aren't focused. You're right, though. That is a very common trope over there. But as long as you're not watching only anime, yeah.
And then sometimes when I'm like, oh, I know an anime that's not, and like Death Note, for example. You're like, oh hell yeah, that's not in a school, and you're like, actually,
It starts off there.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, he's a senior in high school and he's in college prep.
Yeah, and it's like halfway through the anime before he leaves it. No, it's just a trope that I'm tired of, and it's in animes where it's not necessary. Like Bleach, it's not necessary for them to all be at high school. Like, the episodes that have the high school in it suck. And
That's actually true. Bleach's best arc, in my opinion, having only seen up to a certain point, is still when they're in the Death City,
well,
Soul Society.
I mean, yeah. Technically, that's also a kind of academy, but I don't consider that. That's more like
that's more like a
martial
dojo.
arts.
Yeah. That's more like if that's set in a school, then Dragon Ball Z is set in a school. Actually, you know what? There was one Dragon Ball Z.
Exactly.
Arc.
That's what I'm saying. You keep going. You're like, oh no, there was this great anime that. Oh, hang on, wait, no, that was
Yeah, there was the Gohan goes to high school arc.
Yeah. One Piece. That's not set in a school. I don't think. There's been like thousands of episodes now.
Yeah, they probably went to school at some point. They probably found a school on a boat somewhere.
Boat school. No, there's no schools.
Would it be the Sailor Academy?
I'm gonna be a fish when I grow up.
Oh God. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you're somewhat enjoying it.
Yes,
so
I am
far.
watching it. I am watching it.
I really want to, because based on what you've said so far, you're coming close to the midpoint interesting bit, and I want to see what you think when you get to the end of the series.
Okay. But yeah, I really like the gang leader.
He is a cool guy. Yeah.
Even the little girl is pretty cool.
Yeah, she annoyed the fuck out of me at first, but she grew on me throughout the series.
She's good. But no, I don't like the girl that's the cyborg girl that's permanently naked, or the main character girl who's an emo and sleeps with the main character, and that's their only traits. Giant fist dude is awesome. He's super aggressive at first and then kind of friendly, but it makes sense because he's all business.
Yeah, and like, he's the leader. He's got to be the tough guy.
Yeah. Tough love. Yeah. So I'm definitely going to watch it till the end.
I'm struggling to remember that guy's name. I think his name was Main.
Oh, I don't remember any characters' names.
I'm going to see if I can remember a few of them. So, main character's guy is his last name is
Jeff.
His name is Martinez, but I can't. David Martinez.
Martinez. Yeah.
The female lead. I can't remember her name. Little tiny chick is named Rebecca. Main is the big dude, the big tough guy with all the cyberware. And I don't remember the other people's names. I think one of them might be called.
Oh, actually, I'm pretty. I do.
What do you think about Finger Man?
I'm not a massive fan of him. Super buff chick though, she's awesome.
She didn't leave an impression on me at all.
She comes across as someone, when you initially see them, who you look at them and think, oh god, they're going to be strongly opinionated and all about, how women are better than men. But she was actually a really cool character.
They did resist a lot of modern tropes in this and actually just wrote good characters. Yeah.
I saw her and thought, oh, it's Zarya.
She does have that look, but not with the pink hair. Yeah, it's blonde. But actually, thinking about it, you're right though. She has more of like a stoic demeanor throughout the whole series, which I appreciate.
She's sensible, and she does still have emotion, and you see that at some points where she wants to do something on one side of her brain because it's the right thing to do, and the other side of the brain because it's, she doesn't want her friends to get hurt or something.
They did do a very good job in that series of making all of the characters. They all have distinct personality traits, but they're not one note, right? Like they have.
Yeah, they're multifaceted.
Exactly. They all fulfill a different role in the group, and they all fulfill a different role in the story. So their personalities are different, but they have layers to them. And they actually have they act like people. They act like humans. They're not just like, I am this one thing, and that's my entire personality.
Except for Hacker Chick and main character chick, in my opinion.
They develop.
Maybe she changes.
They develop. By the end of the series, they develop. But I agree, at the very beginning, that's how they come across.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Hacker Chick grows on me quite a bit by the end of the series. So we'll see what you think.
I see. Yeah, sorry, I offered you a topic and I wrenched it away from you. You were saying something about reading, I think.
Yeah, I was talking about books. I've built up quite a backlog of books. Both
you
audiobooks.
Red Rising again?
I did finish Red Rising again.
Yep.
The original trilogy. I have the books after that, but I haven't started reading them yet.
You haven't brought yourself to...
No. We'll wait. But I did finish a book that... It was a book trilogy that was recommended by a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Called the Shattered... The trilogy is called the Shattered Earth Trilogy.
Okay.
And it takes place... I think... I can't remember the author's name. It's like NK something. So they just have initials and then their last name. You know.
Monkey Kong?
No. It might start with a... I don't know. Anyway, the series is pretty good. It's set in some kind of like a fictional fantasy, setting.
Yeah.
Where the world is like lives in these tiny little communities, and there are constant like devastating natural disasters, mostly earthquakes.
Like tribe civilizations.
Not really, because there are cities and there are larger things, but everyone has like a trade to make sure, because there are these natural disasters always happening. Right. Everyone has like a name, so their name might be like something Strongback and then the name of their community. So they're tied to that community. Their trade is physical labor. Usually like they're trained in combat, or they're trained in like masonry or something like that. They have that title, and then they have their first name. Or there might be somebody who's like, part of the leadership cast. So there's something leader, whatever community.
So it's like there's a strong title system.
There is, but it's all cooperative. It's not like a hierarchy, at least in most of the communities.
It's communist.
Well, no, it's not. Well, in a sense, I would say it leans more towards like a socialist.
FBI, open up.
I'd say it leans more towards like a socialist kind of feel to it, because but not out of some kind of an ideological reason, because it's absolutely necessary. But there's still like commerce. It's not like pure communism, because there's still people trading and buying at markets. There's still people exchanging goods between communities.
Commercism.
Anyway, so there are a few cities that they're also, it's not like a magical power per se, but there's a few individuals that are born with the ability to essentially cause or dampen or intensify these natural disasters by manipulating, an earthquake, say. So that's where it gets the fantasy element to it.
I feel like those would be the first people to be executed.
You're right. They're horribly discriminated against in most places, and there's actually, basically, if somebody finds out their kid is one of these things, they'll beat them to death or drown them or put them out to die. But the main civil, they still need them to keep everyone from dying from earthquakes and volcanoes and stuff. So a few of them are found by people specially trained to keep them in check and brought back to like an academy.
It's not an anime, so it's alright.
There isn't a huge focus on that in the later books, but essentially they're trained to control their powers and to control natural disasters and things, and essentially keep the world put together. The series it has a very odd writing style. I won't go into too many details because I don't want to turn this into a book review, but the book is in the second person. Okay. So first person, you're saying I, right?
Yeah.
Third person, you're talking about someone else, so you're using their first name. So if I was writing a story, it'd be like, Blue is off to the market, right?
Yeah.
This is in second person, so it's like, you were doing this. You didn't realize.
In a different time. Okay, yeah. Like diary entries.
And so it's more like somebody else is telling somebody their own story, is how it's written, and you don't really get a good grasp as to why that is.
And so kind of like George turned suddenly and saw.
That's third person.
But if you're telling someone else their own story.
It's second person is where you say
turned and saw.
Yeah. You
That's
did this.
Weird.
It's very weird. This is the first book I've ever seen written like that. And it makes sense by the end of the book why it's written that way. It's actually planned out.
That, to me, that way of writing is the way that I think that people write fan fiction. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like someone trying to have like a sexy scene and they're putting the person into the scene by saying it's you as opposed to the character.
The writing style did kind of annoy me but I got used to it by the end of the first book, and by about halfway through the second book, I was really invested in the world and just couldn't stop and ended up finishing all three.
Yes.
And that is one thing this author does very, very well, is doing like world building in a very subtle way. They like spoon feed you little bits of information while they're telling the story, and so you never really are just given a bunch of exposition. You're kind of fed it throughout the story, and you figure out bits on your own. And I was able to. They drop enough hints throughout the story that by the halfway through the third book, I was able to predict the ending just based on the hints they had been giving. It ended up being a very good book, but definitely like a unique fantasy genre and a very unique world that they put together for the series.
Yeah, are there any book series that you want to go back to? Because I know I've been a book series, an author that I used to love actually. There's actually multiple series of his that I want to reread. And I know I've talked about it on the podcast before. Was Darren Shatton, and he did kind of horror books. One of the series. And I'm not talking about the mainstream one, because the mainstream one that everyone knows is the vampire series, and I'm not a massive fan of vampires. They don't freak me out. They're a bit too silly for this day and age. Yeah. But he had two other series. One was called The Demonata, which is all about, well, demons being on another plane, and there being an equal number of planes for the humans and for the demons, and sometimes they cross over and blah, blah, blah. And there were some really fucked up stories in those books. And also the other one was a 3-book series about a city that was basically ruled by a dictator, and there was strange magics that the city would perform. And it was a really fucked up city. So that was super interesting, even though it was only set in a single location. So yeah, I've just been thinking about how I really want to go back and read them, but at the same time, I'm like, but if I read them again now, as an adult, many years after I originally read them, and they turn out to be not as good as my memory thinks they were, am I ruining my own memory? Kind of thing.
I have the exact same feeling about it. So when I was younger, the Animorph book series was big.
Yeah.
Which do you know about it roughly?
I know of it. I've not seen it.
Yeah. So it's something like 50 to 60 books, but they're small books. Like they're usually only around 100 pages, or maybe a little bit more. So I actually went back and tried to read a couple of them, probably like 4 or 5 years back, and I was able to, just sitting in an afternoon at my parents' place, I read the first 2 books, because again, it's made for like probably 10 to 13-year-old kind of readers, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older, depending on the reading level.
Yeah.
But it's the same sort of thing. Like, I loved that series. So the concept behind it, 5 like middle school kids, right? They're cutting through a construction site on their way home. Right. And they find a crashed alien spaceship. Like, or they see what? Sorry.
I was just saying my thought process while you were saying all that. First thing was like, oh great, another
Another school
thing.
yeah.
And then the second thing, when you said go through a construction site, it took me back to that Australian advert on the beach.
Which?
The one where it was about don't skip school, kids.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know
Yeah,
the one
we
you
can't
mean,
talk about it, but go on.
Anyway, so they cut through the construction site, encounter an alien that's been shot down, and he's heavily injured. He gives them a piece of technology in desperation because he kind of informs them quickly that their planet's already in the process of being invaded. There are these things that basically can get inside your brain and control you without you actually being like with you seeming completely normal. And
they're
his
like parasite.
They're like a parasite. Is that
the anime?
Oh, okay. I don't know it. But essentially, his species is at war with them, across the galaxy, and they're especially trying to stop this invasion because most other populations aren't as big as the human population, and if they get this many hosts, they could essentially just overwhelm them with numbers.
Right.
And so he gives them the ability. The whole concept of the series is the technology he gives them is the ability to, transform into any animal that they've encountered before.
Okay.
And there was a lot of really good setup in this book series because they put limitations on all sides to make it so that. What do you mean? Well, you're making faces at me.
How does turning into an animal stop you from catching a parasite?
It doesn't. But the parasite is like this slug that essentially can get inside of your. Crawls in through the it crawls in the ear canal and
like oh magic orb that turns into an animal. I'll take an M16, thanks.
There's much more to it than that, but that's the basic setup. There are these parasites. They can only live in the host for 3 days before they need to get inside their natural habitat,
which is
just it's like this nutrient pool that they have to go and swim around in to feed.
How do they get to the pool? How do they make the pool?
They have to construct it, basically dig it, fill it with stuff that resembles their native environment, and add
Not
like nutrients
pylons.
to it. Yeah, so I'm describing the lore very haphazard. A lot of this is kind of fed to you throughout the different books, but essentially it follows these kids fighting a guerrilla war against these aliens that have secretly started to take over the human race, and them trying to make sure they don't get access to like key figures, like high-ranking political figures, to make sure that if they can say do damage to the pool that they have to go back to feed.
Yeah, there's a lot of these kind of stories where it's aliens attacking Earth, and honestly, a lot of them are very. I mean, look at War of the Worlds. I went fucking crazy for that for about 2 months.
You did. You made me watch the musical.
XCOM. No, I didn't.
Well, listen to the musical while we watched the movie, or no, audiobook. No. Did the audiobook? No, you did like. During the podcast, you made us pause the podcast and listen to songs from the musical and then resume the podcast.
It's because I'd been to see the live musical by that point. Anyway, and obviously, like I was talking about XCOM earlier, I've been seeing that game again recently, and I'm like, oh god, I want to play it again so bad. But I really like the story in XCOM because. In the first recent XCOM game, you're fighting the aliens. They've just arrived from Mars, because they always come from Mars. And then the second game, where you're like, well, we killed all the aliens in number 1. No, you didn't. And they've taken over the Earth now, and now you're taking it back from the aliens. It's like, fuck, yeah, it's such a basic, played story, but good god, It
can be entertaining.
It's so good.
It can be a basic story is just fine if it's executed properly.
Yeah.
Like if you can execute like you don't need like a crazy over the top like deep storyline if you just have good characters and bless you. Anyway, that's another book series that I'd love to go back and really reread, because I still remember bits of it. It was one of the first big book series I was really into as a kid. And yeah, and there was a whole bunch of like spin-off books that they made, giving like some of the background and history of some of the other alien races that show up throughout the book. I
think that the first big inverted quote, what the bird? Quotes. Book that I ever read was The Hobbit. And that really stuck in my mind. Go on.
I never read The Hobbit until much later, like in my adult life.
Well, then many years after that, the Hobbit film came out, and I remember being massively disappointed. I don't think even because it was 3 parts, wasn't it? The Hobbit.
Yeah, and that was a mistake. They basically did that because they were like, "Well, we need a trilogy," but the Hobbit itself, the book, was like 300 pages, whereas the actual Lord of the Rings, there was like 4 books.
Yeah,
and so they made a mistake trying to stretch the Hobbit out into a trilogy because there wasn't enough content.
The book essentially ended with the first film. Like, they were at the mountain, they were in the mountain, the dragon was there.
Yeah, and then they just made up 2 extra films.
Yeah, and so I never ended up watching. I know I've seen the first one all the way through. I think I've seen part of the second one, and I've not seen any of the third one.
Yeah, I think that's right in line with what I've done as well. I know I've seen the first one. I've seen the first one a couple times because I do quite enjoy that movie. It's a nice, it's not a movie where I'll sit down and just watch it. It's a movie that I'll put it on in the background while I'm doing something else, while I'm cooking or while I'm doing laundry.
I think it's fair to put down as a guilty pleasure, as long as you're not like a mega Lord of the Rings fan, because then it's just insulting.
I wouldn't even say it was a guilty pleasure. I'd say it was just it's good. It's not great. It's not like an epic. It's not bad. It's good. You put it on, you'll enjoy your watch through of it, and then when it's over, you kind of forget about it.
I don't know. I think I kind of missed the old days of when an evil villain was really evil. Like, I remember absolutely despising Grimer Wormtongue. Do you know who that is?
Not a clue.
Okay, Grimer Wormtongue was the right hand man of the King of Rohan. Yeah.
Oh, I know I know him from the movies.
And yes, and he was like this slippery, gross character who just dripped with evil, and they didn't try and make him like, oh, but he's only doing it for his family kind of thing. No, he was an evil man who worked for Sauron, and sometimes you want that kind of, but the bad guy's doing it for a good reason. Sometimes you want that. But sometimes you just want a real fucking villain.
You know what? Despite my profession not profession, but there's a word when you profess something. Is profession the right word? It sounds like it's saying, this is my job.
No.
Anyway, what I'm trying to say, despite the fact that I've said on multiple occasions that I really do like a story that is morally gray, I like a villain with some depth to him. There is something just really refreshing about having just that standard, this guy's a bastard, and he's a bastard because he wants to be. He's not doing this for his family. He's doing this just because he likes to step on squirrels. He's just a douche.
I mean, hell, Sauron. No one can name a single good thing about Sauron. I mean, hell, even in comedies like fucking Spaceballs, like
Dark
that
Helmet.
villain, yeah, he's just an asshole. I love it.
Some of the lines from that, because all I can think when I think of Dark Helmet is the at the very end of the movie when they're having the lightsaber fight, and he's just like, "I see your Schwartz is as big as mine," and then right before they, that's such a good movie. Spaceballs was a really good movie.
But yeah, no. Instead, you have this kind of, the in the Hobbit. There's the leaders of the different armies who are just being greedy over the gold, and so you're just like, these are meant to be the good guys, and I don't want to support them. Hell, I have more faith in the fucking dragon at this point.
Well, actually,
the fucking greedy bastards.
I feel like I want to bring this up because this is something I've been noticing in a lot of like, especially more modern movies. Is I find myself really liking the villain in a lot of cases more than the protagonists. And I'm trying to think of an example of something recently that I can point to for this. The He-Man remake.
Oh
yeah, Skeletor.
Yeah.
But I mean, the classic version of him, he's a perfect example of just a pure villain. He's just like, hey, fuck you, I'm evil.
So you can say, fuck you, Spider-Man.
Yeah, I know, I was thinking about that. But yeah, no, I do think the other thing, before I forget about this, is there seems to be a lot of movies coming out in the last few years that has almost like a fetishized obsession with making the villain more relatable. Like, think of the Cruella movie. It's like, oh, remember this lady who was pure evil and wanted to like kill Dalmatians for their coats and blew smoke in the main character's face? Yeah, but turns out she has a tragic backstory where her mother got killed by a dog.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, sure. The reason she hates Dalmatians is because her mother got killed by a Dalmatian who pushed her off a balcony.
That's like a fucking joke on the internet. Like, why do you hate printers so much? A printer killed my whole family.
Exactly. They turned the joke and made it into Corella's actual backstory. Why do you want to make fur coats? A fur coat killed my mother.
Oh my god, to be fair, if they started coming out with, like, a film where stick bugging people is, like, the ultimate evil, or just rickrolling, Rickroll is the final villain.
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think of... I had a perfect example on the tip of my tongue, and now I can't think of it. There was a movie or a TV show that came out recently where I just found myself just constantly rooting for the villain. And
any of the recent Girlfriend of the Joker.
Oh, Harley Quinn
films. Any of them. Because the main character's meant to be Harley Quinn, and
she just isn't.
It's not
in the
good.
In the first one of those, the first Suicide Squad movie that they did. I quite liked Will Smith's character in that. But again, it was the same thing. He's a villain. You can't
talk about Will Smith anymore without me picturing him going up into whatever scene he's in. Just the genie just waddling up. Bam. Oh god.
Oh,
he really
actually, speaking of movies, they're making an Indiana Jones 5. Did you hear about this?
I've not seen any of the Indiana Jones films.
Much after the fact, I didn't watch them like when I was a kid. But I want to say in college, I watched the first 3, and they are quite good.
I have no doubt of that, but my family have never been interested in it.
They made a 4th one, like 10, 20, 30 years later, with Shia LaBeouf as Indiana Jones' kid.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing scenes from it.
And now they're doing a 5th one, like...
Is
Harrison
Shia
Ford
LaBeouf still in it?
No, I think they nixed him, but...
Fuck.
But Harrison Ford, like, he's the guy's on the verge of retirement. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure he can still act because he was a great actor, but he's I don't know.
It's like
he's not
singers
really
from back in the day who get on stage these days, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, is this person from 50 years ago?" And they start singing, and everyone's like, "Yeah."
I kind of think that might be an indictment of singers now, that singers from like 50 to 70 years ago are still drawing audiences. Because there hasn't been like a new version of them, if you think about it. There hasn't been like a new... Because like the whole like... I mean, I don't know much about it, but like the revolution with like rock becoming a huge thing and giant
the
music
rock is
labels
fine.
and rock star. But no, but
rock. Sorry.
what I'm saying is like you had these huge music labels and all that stuff, and there really hasn't. That was the first time it happened, and you really don't get that anymore. And so, I don't know. I wonder if that's maybe why people are constantly going back to those.
Ozzy Osbourne, for example, he's an old dude now. He did amazing music back in the day, but I doubt he can still scream his fucking head off like he did in the old videos.
It's true.
I don't know. It just feels a bit like they're setting people up for a failure when some people get up on the stage these days, because they're so unfortunately past their prime, because that's the way that acting is and singing is. You need a good, healthy body, young body, to be the top of the game.
It depends on what kind of singing you're talking about. Because I think that, like, if certain kinds of singing, like the kind of, like, maybe slower melodical stuff, or maybe like blues or jazz or something like that, I think an old person who's really cared for their voice can probably do a good job.
I think, blues for sure is one type of music that certainly does lend itself to that kind of rocking chair and an old guitar.
I just thought of another movie that I watched since our last podcast.
Go on.
So, do you know the movie Mr. Deeds? It's
No.
a fairly modern one. It was made by starring Adam Sandler, and I remember seeing it when I was younger, and going like, okay, that was pretty funny, standard Adam Sandler movie. I only found out recently, though, that it actually was based on a classic movie from the 30s called like Mr. Deeds Comes to Town or something like that. Same basic plot line, but I ended up finding on YouTube they have the full video, like, because the movie's out of copyright now, so you can just watch it. And it's all in black and white, first of all.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite a good movie. Like, and it's still got funny moments to it, but it's not like the over the top kind of Adam Sandler comedy. And it's just, how do I put this? Like, it follows the same basic plot line of the movie, where guy from the countryside, who's fairly well off for living out there, finds out that he had like a rich uncle who died in an accident and left him $20 million, which again, this is during the Great Depression, so that's a fuckload of money. Mm-hmm. And he's just like perfectly content with his like country life. So when they tell him, it's like, oh, you got this inheritance, he's like, and he doesn't react, and like, did you hear me? And he's like, oh, I heard you. So are you guys going to stay for dinner tonight? And then it's him going to the big city in New York, and everyone is like kind of underhanded and trying to get money from him, or trying to manipulate him, or trying to do this. And at first they take him for like this country bumpkin, but he's much more clever. They mistake his earnestness for stupidity, because he's not trying to get a leg over on anybody. No. And so he sees through all the machinations and stuff, and it's actually quite a good movie. I really enjoyed watching it. And it's from like almost 100 years ago now.
Damn. Yeah. Well, I mean, hell, so I think some Disneys are probably coming close to that now.
That's true, yeah, some of the earlier ones. I think Snow White was like one of the first ones.
Never seen Snow White. I think the earliest one I've seen is Pocahontas.
Is
that earlier than Notre Dame?
I think it is. No, I don't know. I don't know now. These are all the movies that I watched. It was a big Disney movie household when I was a kid. That was mostly what I watched growing up. I know my mom's favorite one was Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, apparently they're on 99 years of storytelling. No, that's not right. In 1937, Walt Disney Animation Studios released its first fully animated feature film.
And that was it Snow White?
Snow White, yeah.
Yeah, got it right. So yeah, they're 90-something years now. It's, what is it? 85
so Snow
years?
White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and then Dumbo. Okay, Dumbo's the first one that I might have seen.
I didn't see Fantasia until much later. But I did see
Haven't seen that
Dumbo.
either.
I did see Pinocchio.
Haven't seen Bambi.
I saw Bambi.
There's a lot of random ones that I don't recognise after that. Then Cinderella. I probably saw that when I was young.
I saw Cinderella. Yeah.
Haven't seen Alice in Wonderland, although everyone knows the story for it.
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
seen
everyone
that
knows the
one.
story for all of them, but
Yeah,
Peter Pan, seen that one for sure.
saw that one as well. So far,
Man.
the only one I haven't seen is Fantasia.
I guess Pocahontas was way more recent than I thought. Where the fuck is it? Wow, it was after Lion King, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid. That surprises me. God, there's a lot of these I haven't seen. Jungle Book. Sword in the Stone was a great one.
Yeah, I forgot. I didn't,
Underrated, I think.
I didn't even realize that
I
was...
love that.
You're right, I've only seen that one a couple times, but I have seen Sword in the Stone.
I love the owl. Archimedes?
Archimedes, yep, this little pet owl.
Yeah. But anyway, we got to a happy point in the podcast.
Yeah, we're just... Yeah, exactly. We've made our way from Twitter to just happiness and wholesomeness, talking about Disney movies and... What was it? Mr.
Yeah.
Deeds Comes to Town.
I just received a message saying Atlantis Disney.
Atlantis,
What?
that's a pretty good movie.
When I'm not seeing that.
Atlantis came out either in the late 90s or the early 2000s, but that was a really good one, too.
Oh. Did it?
Yeah.
I've never heard of Atlantis.
It's good. I've actually rewatched that one within the last
The Lost
year.
Empire.
Yeah, it's quite a good one.
Oh, that was the steampunk one. Okay, I think I had a game on the PC like when I was very young from it, and I got out of a cereal box. You know how you used to get CDs in cereal boxes.
Yep, I do.
But I have never seen it, and I remember it annoying the shit out of me, that game. Because it was one of these. It wasn't just a game in a cereal box. There were 3 CDs, and they weren't normal CDs. They were those like tiny CDs. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
Yeah,
They're
and it was
GameCube size
3
CDs.
parts. Yeah, exactly. But they ran on a PC.
Yeah, for God, we're getting to the
yeah.
point where people might not know this, but yeah, when the CD tray pops out, there's a little indent in the middle of it. That's for those tinier CDs.
Back in my days, I was putting VHSs into my PC.
That's true. Yeah, just VHS tapes. Oh man.
Yeah. Good.
Dude, quickly before we end off, one of the
Yeah.
very first like machinima style videos that I did using like video game footage, I did it using a VCR. Like I had a VCR hooked up to a PlayStation and an Xbox. And the reason I had it hooked up that way was there was a game that you got for the Xbox where you could record like vocals.
Right.
And so I had that hooked up so I could talk and on the VHS tape record the footage from the PlayStation. And I was, well, PlayStation 2, I should say. I should clarify. And so
Right.
I was able to make like a short little, it's long gone now because it's on a hard drive that died ages ago. I do have some of the earliest machinima stuff that I ever made on DVDs back there. Back in the day. But yeah, very first ones using the fucking
My dad
VHS
used to
player.
have to you get magazines with basically lines of code in it, and you'd have to input them to like basically make the game on your system.
That's actually kind of cool.
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah, that's a good place to end it off. That was a fun one. I mean, it didn't start in a fun place, but it certainly ended in one. Actually, I take that back. I had a lot of fun in the first part of this.
sort of a rant. Yep.
Rant's always fun. All right, this is going to be the end of episode 98 of the TMCJ podcast. Thank you all for listening, and you will hear us again next time for episode 99.
Blue, 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 blue.